So, let's talk about something huge happening in India. The country has basically ripped up its entire labor rulebook and started fresh. We're talking about a system that affects hundreds of millions of people, and it's one of the biggest legal shakeups the country has ever seen. So, why the massive change? And what does it actually mean for workers and businesses on the ground? Let's break it all down. First things first, to really get why this is happening now, you have to look at the bigger picture. This historic reform isn't happening in a vacuum. It's taking place against a backdrop of absolutely incredible job growth in the Indian economy. Just look at this number, 16.83 crore. That's 168 million net new jobs created in just 6 years. That's between 2017 and 2024. I mean, that is a staggering figure, and it really shows you just how dynamic the country's job market has become. And when you add that many jobs, you see a pretty dramatic impact. The national unemployment rate was basically cut in half, dropping from 6% all the way down to just 3.2% in that same period. So more people were working than ever before. But the legal system they were all working under, well, it was seriously creaking under the strain. Okay, so the economy's booming, jobs are being created. What's the problem, right? Well, the problem was the rulebook itself. It wasn't just old, it was this tangled, complicated mess that was actually starting to hold back progress. Imagine you're trying to start a business, or maybe you're just a worker trying to figure out your rights. Now imagine having to navigate 29 different laws, a lot of which overlap or even contradict each other. The source material calls it a complex jungle, and honestly, that's the perfect way to describe it. It was just a nightmare for everyone involved. So why was this overhaul so desperately needed? Well, it really boiled down to 3 core issues. First, you had just way too many laws, which made it almost impossible to comply with everything. Second, trying to enforce them was just as messy, with all sorts of different authorities for different rules. And maybe most importantly, a lot of these laws were basically ancient relics, written for a pre-independence India and totally out of step with a modern digital economy.
So how do you fix a legal jungle? You've got a clear path, right? And India's answer was to launch one of the most ambitious legal cleanup projects you'll find anywhere in the world. And this was no small feat. The process started with those 29 tangled, complex laws. They went through this massive exercise of consolidating them, rationalizing them, and getting rid of the clutter. And the end results? Just 4 comprehensive, streamlined codes. It was a deliberate move from total chaos to real clarity. And here they are, the 4 pillars of this new, much simpler system. You've got the code on wages, one for industrial relations, another for social security, and the final one covering occupational safety, health, and working conditions. The idea is that each one is a one-stop shop for its specific area. Okay, so we've covered the how. Now let's get to the really important part, the impact. What does this all actually mean for employees? Well, one of the biggest changes is a massive expansion of some pretty fundamental rights and protections.
I mean, just look at the scale of this change. Before this reform, minimum wage laws only covered certain jobs, maybe about 30% of the workforce. Now, the minimum wage is a statutory right for every single worker in the country, whether they're in the organized sector or not. This is a genuine game changer. And to make sure that new right actually has some teeth, the codes bring in this new concept called a floor wage. Basically, the central government will set a national baseline, a wage floor, based on minimum living standards. And from now on, no state government can set its own minimum wage lower than that national floor. It creates a real safety net for everyone.
But hey, we're living in a world of apps and on-demand services, right? So what about the millions of people driving for ride-sharing companies, delivering food, or doing freelance work online? Where do the gig workers fit into all this? This is a huge deal. For the very first time, Indian law actually formally recognizes and defines what a gig worker is. And you'll notice the definition is pretty broad. It's designed to cover anyone who's earning a living outside of that traditional 9-to-5 employer-employee box. Just defining them is a critical first step to protecting them. And that recognition leads directly to this, a brand new social security system designed specifically for gig and platform workers. The way it works, as explained in the source material, is that the platforms themselves, the aggregators, will have to contribute about 1 to 2% of their annual turnover into a central fund. And that fund will then provide things like life and disability insurance, health benefits, and even old age pensions. Okay, so that's the worker side of the equation, which is huge. But this reform is a two-way street.
It's also designed to make life a whole lot simpler for businesses, making it easier to follow the rules, to grow, and, hopefully, to create more formal jobs. One of the biggest changes is actually in the whole mindset of enforcement. The old government official was the inspector, and their role was basically to police businesses and hand out punishments. The new role is called the inspector-cum-facilitator. The focus now is on guidance, on helping businesses get things right, rather than just trying to catch them doing something wrong. Now, this number, 300, might just look like a number, but it represents a really significant change. Before, any company with more than 100 workers needed government permission for layoffs. That threshold has now been raised to 300. This gives a lot more medium-sized firms the flexibility they need to operate. And the simplification just keeps going. Instead of a tangled mess of different licenses, businesses now deal with a single registration framework. A lot of minor, first-time offenses have been decriminalized, so instead of facing jail time, it's now just a fine. And finally, the whole system is going digital, with electronic records, which should make everything more efficient and transparent.
So when you put all of these massive pieces together, new rights for every worker, pioneering protections for gig workers, and much simpler rules for businesses, what's the big picture? Is this the foundation for a truly future-ready workforce?
There's a quote from the source material that really just nails the whole philosophy here. It says, "The goal is to strike a balance between the welfare of the workers on one hand and the efficiency of the businesses that create the jobs on the other." And that's really the bottom line. The ultimate goal here is to transform the entire labor ecosystem, to create a system that is simpler, fairer, and way more modern, one that actually helps a 21st century economy grow instead of holding it back. And that leaves us with the final defining question. On paper, this is without a doubt the most significant labor reform in India's history. But the real test, of course, starts now. Will this massive overhaul truly build a more equitable and a more efficient labor market for the next generation? Really, the future of India's entire workforce depends on the answer.